Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. Terence Crawford. Why is there so much hate for Terence Crawford? I've been paying attention to Terence Crawford for quite some time. And I can understand when it comes to boxing fans having a favorite fighter. I can understand boxing fans not liking the decisions of some fighters. But Terence Crawford, for someone who I would say the majority of boxing fans and majority of athletes, right? They recognize Terence Crawford as probably the pound for pound best when it comes to boxing. However, there's always been a bit of an issue about his selection of opponents and how his opponents have not been as great as Terence Crawford or provided or presented a threat to Terence Crawford. Now, a lot of people say that could be why Terence Crawford doesn't do well when it comes to pay-per-view. That could be why Terence Crawford is a guy who can walk down the street and nobody mobs him, because Terence Crawford chooses to be antisocial, keep to himself, and avoid the mainstream. Now, myself being a parent, 4 kids, I don't necessarily disagree with Crawford wanting to keep his life private, shield his family from mainstream media and stuff like that. But at the same time, being in his position, at some point, you gotta wonder when you're gonna actually kind of step out from the dark and come out there and really try to push yourself and seize the opportunity that you have to really take your entire profile and platform to another level financially. And sometimes that may require you to get in there and fight some really, really high-risk fights. Now, I will say this, in boxing, man, once you get in the ring with anyone, that's a serious fight. It's a serious threat because it just takes one punch to change your life. So there's always excitement, and there's always going to be a sense of wonder whenever people watch Terence Crawford get in that ring. Because for me, I'll tell you, I've always felt when Terence Crawford gets in the ring, he is going to find a way to win. And what I really enjoy watching about Terence Crawford is he will get hurt in a fight. He will get touched up. He will get buzzed. He will get what they call the wake-up call. And when that happens, normally you see a light go off in him, and he can be vicious. Now, what we saw with him and Van Steen, I think he definitely wasn't doing things instinctively, but I don't quite understand the whole thing about people really, really having the disdain for him. And a lot of it seems to derive from the whole thing with Earl Spence. But Terence Crawford is one of boxing's best. When you look at his skills, what he brings to the table, you look at what he's done since he's turned pro, you look at what he's done as an amateur. I mean, if we want to talk about his talents and his ability to perform in the ring, I mean, that list is probably longer than a giraffe's neck. That's just being real. So that alone deserves to be applauded and deserves some kind of recognition. But that's just not enough in boxing. Now, since Crawford's returned pro, he, for the most part, has ran circles around the divisions that he's been in. 130, 135, 140, 147. He's ran circles around those guys. Welterweight, lightweight, super lightweight. So when you're talking about him and people talking about Terence Crawford will never get to the Hall of Fame. Look, let's not take it to the stupid. Let's hold your horses now. Just because he's not in there fighting the fights you think he should fight, or any boxer for that matter, that doesn't mean he's not going to be selected for the Hall of Fame. To be quite frank with you, What he did, again, running those circles around the guys at the 3 different weight divisions and becoming an undisputed champion at one of them, right? That's more than enough for him to probably be elected when he's eligible, probably right out the gate. You know what I'm saying? But he's getting up there in age, man. And aside from everything that he was able to do since he's turned pro, in my opinion, he looks like he's slowing down a bit. I'm just saying. But at the end of the day, has Terence Crawford really fought a fighter that's been kind of close to their prime or that's been truly outstanding? You know, let's really think about that. Now, is it Terence Crawford's fault? You know, you can't make somebody fight him, but then at the same time, you can't make someone like Crawford, who's stubborn as hell, you can't make him go into a deal or go into a fight with something that he doesn't believe in or something he doesn't want to do. So now that he's with BLK Prime and he's left Top Rank, I think this is where a lot of fans who may have been Bud supporters, right? Because they already had guys who just didn't like him anyway, because everyone's picking, is either you're on Team Spence or you're on Team Crawford. But there's some guys who are on Team Crawford who have jumped ship because they felt like, you know what, man? Crawford left Top Rank to make the biggest fight in boxing. He should have never signed up with Top Rank the second time anyway. He should have never re-signed. It just pushed the fight back a few more years. All the ups and downs with Top Rank, he's gonna go ahead and leave him, doing things on his own, hooks up with BLK Prime. Things couldn't materialize. Just a waste of time and effort. And a lot of people feel, well, this is a fact. He was talking with BLK Prime, you know, months before even coming to the table with the guys over at PBC. So the talkings and dealings with BLK Prime, that was already in place. So Crawford was looking for the plan A, the plan B, and plan C. He wanted to make sure that he would have something in line. I don't fault him for that. But there are a lot of boxing fans, a lot of people, and even myself who look at that and say, probably not a good move. Not going to make me hate Crawford. But if you go to some of these comment sections in some of these YouTube videos, and you go on Twitter, you'll see Terence Crawford is on the bad boy list, the naughty list. Okay? So instead of him fighting Earl Spence, which, you know, you kind of got to blame both of them a little bit, you know what I'm saying? But instead of him coming out and making the biggest fight that could have been made, that wasn't happening because he was on Top Rank, you look, man, undisputed title on the biggest stage, man, and he chose not to do it. He went from possibly being on the biggest stage possible in boxing. You got the damn Super Bowl coming up and everything. Could have had the promotions and everything running on the Super Bowl. Could have had him and Spence come out and do a face-off during the Super Bowl. Could have went on the little world tour, man, promoting the fight. All kind of stuff was in place. Could have been taken advantage of. But instead of him fighting on a huge stage, this is where we got to be real here, man. He selected to fight on a smaller stage in his hometown of Nebraska. And to do it against an opponent that most people didn't even know existed. But I think we got to really be fair when we're talking about that fight not materializing with Crawford and Spence, because although Crawford had several pokers in the fire, and he was just waiting to see which one would heat up, which is good for him, but it's a bad business practice. You know what I'm saying? There has to be some transparency, like we've talked about in other videos. You just can't come out here and decide you're going to be all about yourself. When you're trying to make one of the biggest fights of this era, you and the other person or the other person's team, You have to work together. You got to work together. There's going to be some compromise. There's going to be some areas where you guys can collaborate. There has to be some flexibility. Everything just can't be your way. And although there are some things in the negotiations where Crawford was like, okay, cool, no problem. I'll take this, I'll take that, whatever you want. I just want to fight. But it just sounds like maybe there's some things Crawford could have done a little better. Could have been a bit more organized, a bit more structured. Sounds like Earl Spence and his team could have been more organized, a bit more structured, took him a bit serious. Crawford had to go secure a couple lawyers, try to advance talks, negotiations. Things started to bubble up, and then Crawford just said, you know what, I'm going to do what's best for me, and that's what people are just focusing on. They're not looking at all the thrash that happened leading up to Crawford deciding to just jump ship, okay? Now, remember, he had the pokers in the fire and all that. He wasn't as transparent as he could have been. He has no obligation, but still, good business. You know, you want to have open communication, some transparency, so everyone kind of knows what they're up against, because you don't want to waste time. Time is money. And when you're talking about wasting time in boxing, it's not just the fighter that loses money. It's not just the promoter that loses money. Those agencies you don't want to piss off are those sanctioning bodies. A lot of money lost. So I would say you can't really blame Crawford more than Spence. You can't really blame Spence more than Crawford, because the ball was dropped by, I'm just going to say, both the Crawford team and Spence team. Because let's be straight. If both of them really wanted that fight to be made, and they're like, F it, just make the fight, that fight would have been made. There wouldn't have been all this back and forth and all the finger pointing and all the, dead time in communication and lack of timeliness and everything. That wouldn't have been an issue. So let's just be real. If both of them really, 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 really wanted that, and they were working together to make it a win-win, that would have came off. So I think there's equal blame is to be shared, and I don't think that's fair that Crawford is just really, really taking the brunt of the fallout, and everyone's kind of poking him in the eye for it. But we talk about Earl Spence would have been a fighter in his prime and a real threat to Crawford, although most of us see it as a 50-50. That right there is a kind of fight that Crawford needed, and even Spence needed. They needed that fight. Two fighters, undefeated, knockout artists, outstanding condition, outstanding skill sets, outstanding amateur pedigree, the two number ones battling for the undisputed at welterweight. It didn't happen, though. So you look at, okay, why are we making a big deal about Crawford not fighting Spence? Well, he's fought a lot of fighters ranked in the top 10, 135, 140, 147. He's fought guys who had names in the divisions. But when we're really talking about the best fighters that Crawford has gotten in there with, I think, what are we talking about here? Sean Porter? Look, as much, I give him credit for the fight. He stopped Sean Porter, but Sean Porter's father, Kenny Toothpick Joe Jackson Porter, Kenny Toothpick Joe Jackson Porter came out and he said his son wasn't doing what he's supposed to. I mean, he publicly lynched his son, Sean Porter, at the end of that fight right there in the ring. Humiliated him. So Kenny Toothpick Joe Jackson Porter took away from Crawford's win by saying Sean was, for the most part, about half of himself. So a lot of people felt like, you know what? Sean had one foot in retirement. He's past his prime, and he didn't really give his all in the training camp. So Crawford got a win that maybe had Sean trained the way he should have, Crawford would have never got the victory. I say he got the victory, the box checked. It is what it is. Then they go on and they talk about Yuriorkis Gamboa. When he fought Terence Crawford, look, let's be real. The Gamboa that fought Terence Crawford isn't the Gamboa that fought Devin Haney. He's not the Gamboa that fought Tank. He's not the Gamboa that fought Pitbull Cruz. But he wasn't a prime Gamboa who was the Cyclone of Guantanamo, a tornado, a cyclone, a Guantanamo when he first hit the scene and blew our minds away. This little small guy with this speed and power and kind of in a weird way looked like Mike Tyson. That wasn't the same Gamboa. Then you had, where I think some people try to say Victor Postal was a real threat. People were afraid of Victor Postal. Man, I get tired of hearing that narrative. That is not the case. Victor Postal was solid, but he wasn't a great fighter. Okay? But he was solid. And Crawford did what he had to do to Postal. But Postal wasn't great or elite. But some people did see him kind of as a boogeyman. Then you talk about the win over Amir Khan. I think we can all agree that Amir Khan had the name. Amir Khan just was too brave for his own good. And he was way past his prime. But even in his prime, I mean, maybe Crawford beats him because of the power Crawford has. But you got to think, a prime Amir Khan with that hand speed, movement, and he had power. It's kind of tough to see, to come in. I couldn't say with confidence that any of these top guys fighting Amir Khan in their prime will just walk through him. No way. Good chance of them winning because of their power, their style, timing, etc., and Amir Khan's weak chin. But also a very good chance of Amir Khan winning because of his style, his speed, and he had power. And he had boxing IQ, and he had great legs. So all those guys are good fighters. Even in their primes, I'm not sure they would have really beat Crawford. But it would have been competitive. But the thing is this. Crawford and what he's done to opponents in the ring and the opponents that he's faced, not really kind of like, you can't really say he is on that same plateau with a Floyd Mayweather. You just can't do that. I don't know any fighter out there we can come and say, you know what, that guy's like Sugar Ray Leonard. Nah, that's not the case. Okay, Floyd Mayweather, Sugar Ray Leonard, them guys fought the best. And whether you like Ray Leonard or not, people want to call Ray Leonard a junkie because he got hooked up on drugs. Want to hate on Mayweather because he's all about talk about the money and stuff like that, and he keeps his name in the media, whether it's positive attention or negative attention. It's all the attention that they need to keep his name afloat. But we got to look at what type of accomplishments a lot of these guys had, man. And what they were able to do at such young ages and winning gold medals and becoming champions and stuff and defeating Hall of Famers, man, before they're 23. That's a big deal. Now, you talk about Crawford and Crawford coming up. How do you think Crawford would have done with the likes of, since we're talking about Hall of Fame and we're talking about the guys who get there and the type of work they put in and the type of fights they had, right? You think about Crawford and you think about Leonard. You think about Duran. You think about Hearns. You think about Mayweather, okay? You think about Tito Trinidad, Wilfredo Benitez, Oscar De La Hoya, even the little Manny Pacquiao. When you really think about these guys and who they fought, when you go down their resume, all those names jump out. They're all killers. And when you look at Terence Bud Crawford's resume, I'm not saying he didn't fight, to me, good fighters, but I think the fans, for the most part, would say there's no comparison. These are guys who entered the Hall of Fame. Not all were undefeated, but they chose to be great. Chances make champions. Bud has chosen not to be great and not to take the chances to be really recognized as the best champion of this era. So it is what it is. But he had a chance to prove himself when he went and, fought this guy Evanescence, which nobody even gave Evanescence a chance. But to me, I was hoping Crawford would just blast that dude out within 30 seconds. That's not really what we got to see in that fight. So to me, that fight, although Crawford got the knockout, that told me that, okay, he needs to stay active. Or this maybe he's slowing down a bit, but it could just be like my partner MD Mills and I were talking. It just could be some inactivity and some ring rust. But when Crawford goes out there and says his goal is to just remind the world that he's the best fighter on the planet and telling people, tune in, watch my fight. This is the thing. Did he give us something to make us feel we need to tune in again? That's where we got to be honest, man. So I'm not sure that Crawford even cares anymore when it comes to being the greatest and fighting the best. I think Crawford kind of cracked the code on being able to manage his own career and make as much money as possible now. Not saying he's looking to duck anyone. He don't strike me as that kind of person, but if he can go and fight an opponent like an Evander Cien and make $10 million, and then have the opportunity to fight a guy like, let's say, Virgil Ortiz or even Earl Spence for, let's say, $15 million and for some belts. He may snatch up that easy food and not go out there and try to digest that shark sandwich. You know what I'm saying? He's not looking. I don't think he's looking to go out there and risk his career, his undefeated record, and put his legacy in jeopardy for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 more than the purse that he's making. I think he's going to be looking for big money, and that's one of the limiting factors as far as a lot of these promoters wanting to sign him because of how much money Crawford wants. Now, when we're talking about money, he's been paid pretty good throughout his career, man. Although he hasn't really been a ticket seller anywhere outside of Omaha. Okay? Well, we know those prices out there in Omaha. I mean, it's not going to be the same as buying a damn, tickets out there in Vegas. And then he hasn't really been a pay-per-view seller. Like, these are the things that hurt, like Bob Arum and ESPN Plus just trying the best to market him and to be able to sell the Terence Crawford product. But it is what it is, man. It just wasn't able to get it done on that app. Not really sure what happened with the whole BLK Prime app. But there was a huge push from ESPN, Bob Arum, to try to kind of take Crawford and kind of put him out there to the mainstream. And you look at what ESPN taking on the boxing like they did and Bob Arum coming over. Crawford had a lot to do with that deal, and I think the goal was to take a guy like Crawford and to take boxers and to take some MMA guys in UFC and to take some other sports and really make that ESPN Plus and make the app very, very competitive. So in the other areas, it kind of worked out. But for ESPN Plus and maybe what they were hoping for from Bob Arum to deliver boxing-wise, especially with a talent like Crawford, it just didn't happen. It just didn't materialize. And I believe that hurt Bob Arum as far as who knows what the contracts were, the agreements were, bonuses, etc., renegotiating deals with ESPN to have his fights on there. Who knows if the fact that Crawford wasn't able to really draw the kind of numbers they're hoping on pay-per-view, who knows if that since they didn't meet their projections, because that I'm sure during their meetings they look at all this. This is kind of what we anticipate when it comes to the boxing. They got pieces of that pie, and they got UFC, they got this sport, they got this, and they have boxing. So when you look at that piece of the pie where boxing fits into, I'm sure they were expecting to get a certain return when it comes to what Bob Arum was going to be able to provide them with boxing. Terence Crawford didn't help, and it hurt the app, and I don't think they were ever able to really do what they had planned to as far as having boxing on that whole ESPN Plus platform. But you look at a guy like Canelo Alvarez, and you look at DAZN, right? The DAZN app, obviously they've gone in the hole. They've lost some money, but they've invested in so many other areas where, things just didn't work out for them. But the boxing piece and Eddie Hearn, hey, look, he hurt DAZN too. But there still were some areas where they did see some success. I just think so much money had been hemorrhaged in other areas when it comes to that DAZN app, to where it's just hard for them to get back, to even get in the yellow. But there was still some success, but you just didn't really see it with Crawford. So it is what it is, man, with Terence Crawford. And I don't think it has anything to do with him fighting on ESPN Plus. I don't really think it has anything to do with him being over there with Arum. I think Terence Crawford's biggest downfall, I think it really has to do with the talent of his opponents. I think if Terence Crawford would have had more fights against opponents that were more dangerous than the opponents he did face, I think Terence Crawford definitely would have a much bigger profile, man. I mean, we got to understand, when you look at Mayweather, man, early in his career, Mayweather wasn't, like, we know what Mayweather is now. This man can do an exhibition anywhere and, sell a whole lot of pay-per-view and make a whole lot of money, right? He was just he did a video, I can't remember what, I saw it this morning, where he was like, I make more money than you active fighters. I sell more pay-per-view than you active fighters. And I'm just doing exhibitions and I'm retired. And I was like, yo, that's real immature. Mayweather's acting his shoe size. But he's right. But Mayweather wasn't a great seller early in his career. It took him getting, and he fought big names. Mayweather fought champion after champion. He embarrassed people. But it took a fight like what he had with, what's his name, man? The golden boy, Oscar De La Hoya, right? That fight put Floyd Mayweather on a trajectory out of this world when it comes to his profile, finances, Hall of Fame, everything. He basically took over where Oscar De La Hoya left off. And he never turned back. I mean, shit, in 2007, 8, I think it's like 2007, 2008, he fought De La Hoya, man. They did over 2 million. 2 million units, man. And De La Hoya was already a household name, and you know what happened with Floyd. And I get it. This isn't 2007. We're about 16 years removed from 2007. So much has happened in those 16 years. But the point is that Errol Spence is the kind of name that Terence Crawford needed earlier in his career in order for him to be in a much better space now. Look at him now at the end of his career. He had the opportunity to get that signature fight, to get it, and for the undisputed distinction. And he chose to do something different. Again, when I look at it like that, that gets me a little frustrated. Okay? But at the end of the day, Terence Crawford can sleep well at night because, for the most part, he seemed to have done what he's wanted to do with his career. And to this day, he continues to do what he wants to do. And when Errol Spence fights Keith Thurman, if he beats Keith Thurman, and him and Terence Crawford have that 60 days to negotiate a deal, Terence Crawford is going to do what he wants to do. So let's just be real, man. We start looking at fighters of the past. I mean, we don't want to dwell in the past because we miss our future opportunities, but we need to have a good understanding of the past to get an idea of where we can go in the future. And you look at guys like, Mayweather, in particular, like Sugar Ray Leonard, man. This man had 4 fights against 3 boxers who would go on to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, right? By the time he was 25 years old. You look at Canelo Alvarez. As much as people like or dislike Canelo, this man was 23 years old, man, when he fought Mayweather. And then he went on, Canelo, and banged it out with a Puerto Rican dude, Miguel Cotto, when he was 25. And then he was in there, man, getting busy with a prime Gennady Golovkin, right before he turned 27. So when you look at the type of fights that some of, Crawford's colleagues were in, huge fights against elite opponents with recognizable names. And you know what? They sold, and that elevated not only the opponent's profile, but it elevated Canelo's profile. Now, that's not easy to do. I know behind the scenes and promoters and networks, and you got to get everyone to agree to a fight. You know what I'm saying? But what I will say is this. When you're coming into a fight against an opponent and you're the negative 1,400 favorite, negative 2,000 favorite, negative 800 favorite, that speaks volumes about your opponent. And in particular with Evander Cien, I believe Crawford was the negative 1,400 favorite. So that's not good. And he needs to figure out what he's going to do for 2023. Is he really going to look at the legacy? Is he going to look at finally getting that big elite name on his record, someone in their prime? Is he going to look at doing that, or is he going to continue to doing what he wants? I'll tell you this. They may push a mandatory on him. It may not be who we want to see. But if he doesn't plan on returning until, he's going to have to fight the mandatory before Spence, because Spence fighting, him and Thurman are fighting, I think, May 25th. So May, June, July. That means Crawford can fight between now and May, or fight around the same time. Then him and Spence can sort things out, and then they can fight later this year. That's if Spence wins. So yeah, Crawford in his next fight, he can do something, man, and fight a big name, and fight a tough fight. Will he do that? I don't know. But I know if he doesn't do it, we already know the kind of backlash and blowback he's going to receive. But it's time for Crawford to get into those public fights. He can do it if he wants to really grow his platform, his stature. He can get back into the negotiation with Earl Spence like we've been talking about. They don't need to start from scratch. I know Espinosa is saying that, but no, they can pick him at the 50% point. Why not? They don't need to reinvent the wheel. Pick him at the 50% point, man, and push forward. But when you got guys out here, man, Virgil Ortiz, Alexis Rocha, look, man, they're right there. And they're going to get put on, depending on what happens with standing units. But you could see, Rocha or Virgil Ortiz pushed as a mandatory on Crawford. Now they go to purse bid to try to avoid purse bid, and then somebody has to come in if they can't reach a deal. And then Crawford has even bigger problems because Virgil Ortiz is definitely not an easy fight. Alexis Rocha is not an easy fight, but Ortiz is not an easy fight. Now, we all understand what's going on with Ortiz, Stanley Eunice, De La Hoya winning the purse bid, but, crazy things have been happening in boxing lately. That's all I'm saying. Crawford may have to face a killer, and he should get a lot of credit if he fights Virgil Ortiz. Then he'll go into, hopefully, an Earl Spence fight if Earl wins, and then this could be the year to finally get that monkey off of Crawford's back. But it's for him to make a decision on what he wants to do. He won't have any say if the WBO pushes, makes, the mandatory and pushes Virgil Ortiz on him. I understand Ortiz having opportunities to fight Crawford and just for whatever reason, De La Hoya Ortiz not taking the fight or whatever. But at the end of the day, 2023 could be the year for Crawford to come out and have the support of those naysayers who said he's a duck, he's hard to work with, he doesn't generate money, he doesn't deserve to go into the Hall of Fame. His legacy is forever tainted for not taking risk. This could be the year where he can help to kind of undo some of that. Now, will he do it? I don't know, man. Because if he finally does, I'll tell you what, you may see all of a sudden he's able to sell tickets, sell pay-per-views. I'm talking about tickets everywhere. Pay-per-views, the kind of numbers they want to see. But until then, man, this guy in his career, which I think deserves to be respected, I think we definitely should give him credit as being definitely one of the top 3 boxers of this era. But he's just going to see the opportunities and his great career. I think you're going to see it slip through his hands, man. So that being said, Terence Crawford, I'm sure there's going to be an announcement soon about who he's fighting next, because it's heating up in the welterweight division, the WBO. Interesting things happening. But don't be surprised if he doesn't fight Alexis Rocha, if he doesn't fight Virgil Ortiz. Don't be surprised if he fights somebody who we think is just kind of fits the mold of another less than stellar opponent. And then hopefully, if that's the route he goes, hopefully he and Spence can work out a deal. But if not, I'm not sure what Crawford can do to resurrect his career or to command any type of decent payday. I think even at a certain point with BLK Prime and putting up the kind of money that they're putting up, I think even at some point, if Crawford really isn't selling the type of pay-per-view numbers that they were hoping for, I mean, they're just not going to keep putting money into somebody and having them on pay-per-view where they're losing. Like, that's just not how it works. So it's got to be there has to be a winning formula. And to be quite honest, I'm not really sure that the BLK Prime has sorted that out yet. But I'm optimistic. I'm rooting for Crawford. I'm rooting for all boxers, man. That being said, y'all keep cool. Shout out to the veterans, all 7 continents, and I'm in the breeze.